A notorious criminal in the underworld used his power and influence to build a kingdom within the prison walls, controlling both prison guards and inmates. He manipulated, bribed, and even engaged in relationships with female prison officers, creating an immense criminal empire. Welcome to True Crime Film. Today, we will uncover the dark secrets within the American prison system, where power and crime intertwine, leading to unimaginable corruption. In 2013, Baltimore Prison in Maryland became the center of a shocking scandal. A gang leader, instead of being strictly monitored, turned the prison into his personal harem. Inside, he had intimate relationships with 13 female guards and even fathered 5 children. Even more astonishing, he openly declared, "This is my prison. Here, I am the law." When this story was reported by American media, it immediately caused a nationwide uproar, becoming one of the biggest scandals in U.S. prison history. Prisons are supposed to rehabilitate criminals, but in this case, it had become a dark kingdom under the control of an inmate. Instead of enforcing the law, prison officers became accomplices, aiding and abetting illegal activities. This shattered public perception of a justice system. So who was this gang leader? And how did he manage to turn the prison into his domain, wielding absolute power? The United States often presents itself as the symbol of democracy and freedom, but in reality, security in the country is far worse than in many other nations. Street robberies happen frequently. Guns are everywhere due to lack of regulation and police misconduct, ranging from excessive violence and racial discrimination to fabricating charges for unlawful arrests, is rampant. In particular, racial tensions between white and black communities remain unresolved and have only intensified, exposing a deep-rooted societal instability that cannot be hidden behind polished slogans. In the 1960s, these racial tensions reached their peak. Under the leadership of Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights movement for black Americans spread across the nation. Initially, black communities formed organizations to protect themselves, but over time, some of these groups evolved into large-scale gangs that carried out criminal activities targeting white people. One of the most notorious of these gangs was the Black Guerrilla Family, or BGF. BGF was founded in San Quentin Prison, California, with the initial goal of protecting black inmates from discrimination and violence at the hands of white prisoners and guards. However, over time, BGF expanded beyond self-defense and became one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the country. Since most of its members were hardened criminals, ruthless and unyielding, the gang quickly became a formidable force. Initially, BGF operated only within California. However, as its membership and influence grew, so did its territorial reach. When Tavon White took over as the leader, BGF reached its peak. At first glance, Tavon White didn't seem particularly remarkable, but he possessed an exceptional level of emotional intelligence. He was highly skilled at reading people and was incredibly ambitious. Under his leadership, the gang rapidly expanded, developing a well-structured organization. In some areas, BGF even rivaled the power of the Italian Mafia, the most dominant crime syndicate in America. BGF's rapid rise posed a significant threat to the U.S. government. To dismantle the gang, authorities devised meticulous plans and implemented harsh crackdowns. However, Tavon White, a cunning and strategic leader, understood that for the gang to survive, he needed protection from within the system. Realizing this, Tavon White didn't hesitate to spend enormous amounts of money to bribe local officials. With deep pockets and well-calculated strategies, he managed to make many people turn a blind eye to BGF's illegal operations. This protection from the shadows of power allowed BGF to expand without immediate government interference, making it an increasingly uncontrollable force. Tavon White did not overlook any industry that could generate massive profits. His gang was involved in smuggling, kidnapping, murder, armed robbery, and even expanded into drug trafficking, a highly lucrative but risky business. As a result, his gang became increasingly brazen, showing no regard for the law. Through his criminal empire, Tavon White earned the infamous nickname Bull Terrier, a ruthless and fearless gangster. However, as the saying goes, the more you walk in the dark, the more likely you are to meet a ghost. Tavon White's arrogance, his self-proclaimed status as the king of his domain, ultimately led him into serious trouble. His reckless behavior and lack of restraint not only disturbed society, but also threatened the white gangs operating in the area. In one violent clash, Tavon White's organization suffered heavy losses, losing both men and resources. Feeling humiliated and seeing his authority challenged, Tavon White, in a fit of rage, decided to personally lead a bloody retaliation to teach his rivals a lesson. However, he never expected that his enemies had already made their move, secretly tipping off the police about his plan. It was Tavon White's own overconfidence and complacency that marked the end of his reign. As he attempted to carry out the assassination, law enforcement was already waiting in ambush. The moment he made his move, officers stormed in and arrested him on the spot. After Tavon White was captured, BGF called upon the black community to take to the streets in protest, hoping to pressure the government into releasing him. But the U.S. government had long viewed this gang as a major threat and was determined to wipe them out. Despite the large-scale protests from the black community, the government did not back down. Instead, they charged Tavon White with attempted murder and locked him away in prison. Under normal circumstances, when a gang leader is imprisoned, their organization weakens and the leader is left to rot behind bars. But that wasn't the case for Tavon White. Instead of fading into obscurity, he turned the prison into his own kingdom. At first, Tavon White intended to find a way to get out as soon as possible. However, he soon realized that prison life wasn't as bad as he had imagined. Rather than trying to escape, he decided to transform the prison into his black empire and build power within its walls. Inside, he was surrounded by the most loyal members of BGF. Seeing an opportunity to strengthen his influence, Tavon White quickly gathered his gang, using both loyalty and fear to establish absolute control. Ironically, unlike the chaotic power struggles outside, Tavon White found that life in prison was even more comfortable. Here, he wasn't just an inmate. He was a king, ruling over a secret society where his power was not limited by cold steel bars. Not only did he leverage the loyalty of his gang members, but he also saw an opportunity to expand his dominance at Baltimore Prison, a facility housing some of the most dangerous criminals. With his imposing physique and fearless nature, the moment he stepped into prison, he used his fists to prove his worth. His early fights quickly established his reputation as untouchable. It didn't take long for him to recruit a large group of prisoners, including those who weren't originally part of BGF. This group became his loyal underlings, obeying his every command. By exploiting fear and admiration, Tavon White crowned himself as the big boss, establishing a hidden empire inside the prison, where he alone dictated the rules. His loyal followers didn't just serve him by cleaning or giving massages. They also provided him with crucial information. Having spent years in prison, they understood the structure of various gangs and even the habits and weaknesses of the guards. With this wealth of information, Tavon White continued to consolidate his influence, expanding his power within the prison walls. A prison, in essence, is a microcosm of society. Strength alone isn't enough to dominate. Intelligence is also required to control highly valued commodities like marijuana, cigarettes, cell phones, and prescription drugs, all of which are scarce inside. This is how Tavon White began constructing his Black Kingdom. As the leader of BGF, Tavon White had no difficulty smuggling contraband into the prison. Highly sought-after goods like cigarettes, marijuana, and even gourmet food were smuggled in seamlessly. He then resold these items at prices 3 to 10 times higher than their market value. Although the prices were exorbitant, in the closed environment of the prison, the demand for these goods far exceeded the supply. As a result, in just a short period, Tavon White not only gained complete control over the prison, but also monopolized all trade within its walls. With the enormous profits he accumulated, he gradually became the ultimate authority in the prison. However, despite his immense power, there was one thing Tavon White could not solve: his physiological needs. After all, the prison housed only male inmates. And so, after a long time, he began to set his sights on the attractive female correctional officers. In the United States, working as a correctional officer is an ordinary job with modest pay. Many people choose this profession because it does not require high academic qualifications, offers a stable income, and, most importantly, provides opportunities for gray income. In prisons, wealthy inmates often exploit the lack of strict supervision to bribe guards. In return, they receive astonishing privileges such as access to mobile phones, high-end food, or even the ability to renovate their cells into presidential suites. With these illicit earnings, many correctional officers are willing to turn a blind eye to violations, creating a cycle of corruption and injustice within the prison system. Understanding this, Tavon White devised a clever plan to manipulate the system. His first target was a female guard who had been divorced and living alone for years. With his confident demeanor, charismatic presence, and captivating storytelling skills, Tavon quickly captured her attention. He deliberately created opportunities for interaction, sharing tales of his achievements and legendary status in the gang world. Every glance, every word he spoke carried an air of sincerity, slowly breaking down the guard's defenses. To further strengthen his influence, he generously gifted her expensive presents, even managing to buy her a luxury sports car through his outside contacts. Under both emotional and material pressure, the female guard quickly succumbed to Tavon White's charm, becoming his first lover behind bars. But Tavon White was far from satisfied. He knew that control could only be maintained if he had multiple people on his side. So he continued his hunt, targeting young, inexperienced female guards who were more susceptible to manipulation. With his smooth-talking skills and refined approach, it only took a few sweet words before they fell for him. Over 4 years of imprisonment, Tavon White successfully seduced 13 female guards. The shocking part was that all of them were aware of each other's existence, yet they willingly accepted their roles in his harem. Some even volunteered to bear his children. One notable case was a female officer named Jennifer, who gave birth to 2 of his children. But these women were not just part of his harem. They became Tavon White's most valuable assets, helping him expand his illicit business inside the prison. They smuggled drugs, mobile phones, and prescription pills hidden in their underwear or hair, discreetly bringing them inside. Tavon White then resold these items at exorbitant prices, generating massive profits. Each month, his operations earned him anywhere from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. However, Tavon White did not hoard all the money for himself. Instead, he converted it into extravagant gifts such as luxury cars and diamond rings, which he used to reward his female guards, further securing their loyalty and willingness to do anything for him. Under Tavon White's control, the prison resembled the palace of a king. However, his unchecked power eventually bred resentment among white inmates. Unable to tolerate Tavon White's dominance any longer, some white prisoners secretly reported his entire operation to the authorities. At first, officials dismissed the complaints as typical grievances between inmates. But as the number of reports increased, containing detailed information and solid evidence, the authorities had no choice but to take the matter seriously. The FBI was called in to investigate, and what they uncovered exposed the deep-rooted corruption within the U.S. prison system. At first, the FBI used surveillance cameras and wiretapping to monitor Tavon White's activities inside the prison. What they discovered left them stunned. Not only did he control the entire prison, but he was also using a smuggled cell phone to orchestrate illegal operations outside its walls. Even more shocking, the female correctional officers, who were supposed to supervise him, completely ignored his actions. Initially, the FBI assumed these female officers were either accepting bribes or simply negligent in their duties. However, as they dug deeper, they uncovered a truth far more disturbing. The investigation revealed that these women were not just assisting Tavon White in smuggling contraband, but were openly involved in romantic relationships with him. Rather than acting as enforcers of the law, they became his lovers, and some even bore his children. In total, Tavon White fathered 5 children with various prison guards. This discovery left FBI agents in utter disbelief. What was even more shocking was a phone conversation recorded in January 2013. In it, Tavon White boldly declared, "This is my prison. Everyone here listens to me, including the guards. I am the law, and the law is me." His brazen defiance of the justice system stunned the federal investigators. By April 2013, federal authorities indicted Tavon White along with 13 female and 2 male correctional officers. With overwhelming evidence stacked against him, Tavon White faced more than 20 charges, including drug trafficking, smuggling mobile phones and prescription drugs, money laundering, organizing prison fights, and conspiracy to commit murder. Yet in a shocking twist, Tavon White was sentenced to only 12 years in prison. Before this, he had already been serving a 20-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder, meaning his additional crimes in prison did not extend his overall punishment. The reason? He had cooperated with authorities, providing full confessions and exposing the prison guards involved in his operations. His testimony was treated as cooperation for leniency. When the scandal was exposed, the American public erupted in outrage, condemning the correctional officers who had not only abandoned their ethical responsibilities, but had also become accomplices to crime. Whether they acted out of greed or under duress, they could not escape legal consequences. This case did not just reveal the flaws within the U.S. prison system. It also highlighted deep-rooted racial tensions and systemic issues plaguing American society. In particular, the conflict between black and white communities in the U.S. had escalated to the point of being nearly irreconcilable. Whenever disputes arose, both sides tended to resort to violence, contributing to persistently high crime rates across the country. Prisons were originally intended as institutions for rehabilitation, designed to help criminals reform and reintegrate into society. However, due to severe overcrowding in U.S. prisons, this fundamental purpose had been largely eroded. Many prisons now functioned merely as holding facilities rather than centers for rehabilitation. Overworked and exhausted correctional officers struggled to maintain order, leading to lax enforcement and gaps in supervision. This environment allowed prison gangs to thrive. As gang influence within prisons grew, they began dividing power among themselves, exerting control over nearly every aspect of prison life. From hardened criminals to low-level offenders, all were drawn into structured hierarchies under gang leadership. Once these gangs amassed enough power and influence, they extended their reach beyond prison walls, infiltrating not only correctional staff, but also officials at various levels within the prison system. The practice of correctional officers accepting money from inmates in exchange for turning a blind eye or facilitating illegal activities had almost become a routine side income. Some guards and even prison directors were members of criminal gangs themselves. One unique aspect of the U.S. prison system is the unusually high number of female correctional officers, accounting for nearly 60%, the highest percentage in the world. Take the Baltimore prison as an example. Out of 800 correctional officers, 480 were women. With such a ratio, it was no longer surprising that Tavon White managed to conquer 13 female guards and turn them into his lovers. However, the overwhelming presence of female officers in a prison full of male inmates was far from normal. First, in terms of physical capability, women are generally weaker than men, making security enforcement inside the prison more challenging. Second, most inmates in these facilities were members of violent male gangs, while the female guards were often young and lacked life experience. This created the perfect conditions for scandals like the one involving Tavon White. In response to this crisis, a senator from Maryland proposed replacing all female correctional officers with unattractive male officers. However, this proposal immediately faced immense backlash. Many men argued that it violated the principles of freedom and equality that America prides itself on, while women saw it as blatant discrimination against their professional ethics and capabilities. Under pressure from all sides, the proposal was shelved. In the end, Maryland authorities had no choice but to transfer Tavon White and other involved inmates to different prisons to calm public outrage. But the scandal did not fade away. The controversy surrounding it continued to be a hot topic of discussion. With no other solution, the state of Maryland ultimately spent $27 million to demolish the Baltimore prison entirely, putting an end to the story of one of the most notorious prisons in American history. And with that, we reach the end of this shocking story about corruption and dark power within the U.S. prison system. From a mere convict, Tavon White built an empire, controlled an entire prison, and turned it into a criminal stronghold. His reign not only weakened the justice system, but also exposed the corruption and moral decay of those entrusted with upholding the law. In the end, no matter how powerful one becomes, no one can escape the truth. As the old saying goes, evil will be repaid with evil. Every crime will eventually come to light. Stay tuned as we continue to bring you more untold stories and hidden corners of society. Eliminating the Three Evils is an action horror film produced in 2023 by a Hong Kong director. Within just 1 week of its release, the movie grossed nearly $28 million and sparked widespread discussions across social media platforms. However, few know that the main character, Chun Gui-lin, is inspired by a notorious real-life criminal from Taiwan's underworld in the 1900s, Liu Huaning. He was once known as one of the most feared assassins in Taiwan, striking fear into many of the island's most influential figures. But who exactly was Liu Huaning, and what made him such a legend? Let's delve deeper into the life of this infamous cold-blooded killer and analyze every aspect of his dark and brutal journey. Liu Huaning, nicknamed the Cold-Faced Assassin, was born in 1957 into a military family in Baidun District, Taichung City, Taiwan. His father was once a lieutenant general of the Kuomintang. However, when the Kuomintang retreated to Taiwan, life took a harsh turn. Liu's family struggled, living in a cheap house and surviving by selling fruit. At that time, Taiwan was in chaos, and the family's fruit shop was frequently harassed by local thugs. If the gangsters merely took fruit without paying, it was tolerable, but if they were dissatisfied, they would destroy the shop. Liu clashed with these gangsters multiple times, but they outnumbered him, and he was powerless against them. To survive, Liu joined a small local gang as a child, hoping for protection and support. However, he soon realized that the gang didn't treat him as a brother. They only accepted him for the free meals he provided. Upon learning this, Liu quickly left the group and joined another gang called Xiaomaihua. This was a coalition formed by rural people, and its members were fiercely loyal to each other. After being accepted, Liu spent his days collecting protection fees from gambling houses and taking on hired fights. On one occasion, when a local child was being chased, Liu stepped in to help. Armed with just a stick, he fought against 10 attackers. Not only did he drive them off, but he also left several severely injured. After the fight, Liu planned to flee, but his own father turned him over to the police. This betrayal planted a deep-seated resentment in Liu. Every time his father visited him in prison, Liu refused to look at him. It wasn't until one day, when he saw his father's silver hair and frail figure, that Liu understood his father's pain. From then on, Liu silently vowed to change his ways and become a better man. After his release, Liu returned to school and studied diligently. He aspired to join the local military academy, but was rejected due to his criminal record. Unable to fulfill his dream of becoming a soldier, Liu faced one disappointment after another. Eventually, he found himself drifting back into a life of crime. In October 1979, Liu became embroiled in a dispute with the 17 Blades gang over a gambling dispute. Chased by his enemies, Liu fought while retreating. He stumbled into a fruit shop where he spotted a watermelon knife on the counter. Without hesitation, he grabbed the knife and struck, slicing the neck of the rival gang's leader. Blood gushed, and the man died instantly. It was Lu's first kill. Surprisingly, Lu felt no fear. Instead, the act awakened his bloodthirsty nature. He continued his rampage, forcing the remaining gang members to flee in terror. After this event, Lu concluded that survival in the underworld demanded ruthlessness. From that day, he became a different man. Another confrontation arose over gambling profits, sparking conflicts with other gangs in Taichung. After numerous clashes, Lu gained a reputation for his fearless, reckless fighting style. His notoriety caught the attention of Chun Kai Li, the leader of the Bamboo Union Gang, one of Taiwan's most notorious criminal organizations. At just 18, Lu was recruited into the Bamboo Union. Though accepted, Lu yearned for Chen's recognition. But as a newcomer, earning attention from the boss was no easy feat. Determined to make his mark, Lu decided he needed to do something extraordinary to catch Chen's eye. At the time, one of the most dangerous acts in the underworld was to cut off a head, a euphemism for assassinating a rival gang leader. To prove himself, Lu set his sights on Liao Longhui, the powerful leader of the Great Tiger Gang. Hui controlled exclusive hotels and entertainment venues in Taichung and was known as the city's underground secretary. Many had attempted to kill Hui over the years but failed due to his cautious nature. Hui employed decoys, constantly changed his cars, and surrounded himself with bodyguards, earning him the nickname Nine Lives Cat. Lu spent over 3 months tracking Hui. On October 23, 1983, Hui visited a hotel on Sanmin Road, Taichung. Lu and his men lay in ambush all night. While his subordinates were anxious about being discovered, Lu remained calm, even sending his men to buy late-night snacks. As Lu casually drank beer and ate fried chicken, Hui stepped out of the hotel. Without hesitation, Lu approached and shot Hui dead. This moment cemented Lu's reputation across the underworld. What made the assassination even more chilling was that just minutes before pulling the trigger, Lu had been calmly enjoying his meal. From then on, Lu was known as the cold-faced assassin. Impressed by Lu's fearless demeanor, Chun Kai Li kept Lu close as a personal bodyguard. Not long after, Du Guolan, a gang leader from Bei District, Taoyuan City, approached Lu with a request to assassinate Yang Baifeng, leader of the Great Tree Forest Gang. Yang's gang frequently provoked Du's forces to expand their influence. Desperate, Du offered Lu 400,000 Taiwan dollars for the hit, equipping him with 2 firearms. Lu chose to strike at a funeral for a prominent gang leader in Taipei, a gathering place for the underworld elite. On the day of the funeral, as the gang leaders prepared to leave, Lu suddenly opened fire, shooting Yang 5 times. Yang collapsed in a pool of blood. Lu, unbothered by the shocked stares of the gathered mobsters, turned to walk away. Realizing Yang was still alive, Lu calmly returned and fired 2 more shots to ensure the kill. The silence that followed was deafening. No one dared approach him. In the ruthless world of the underworld, survival instincts prevailed. This assassination skyrocketed Lu's reputation. Crime lords began offering him vast sums to eliminate their rivals. One was Hong Guohua, the new leader of the Feng Sha gang, who hired Lu to eliminate Zhang De, leader of the rival Yishan gang. Lu kidnapped Zhang in Hsinchu and drove him to Huke Cemetery, where he executed him. Within a year, Lu had killed 3 major gang leaders. His methods grew increasingly brutal, earning him the nickname Mad Lu. He became known as the #1 assassin in the underworld, killing 8 influential figures within a single week. By this time, Lu had become a figure that struck fear across the criminal world. His brutal reputation brought significant profits to the Bamboo Union. Whenever Chun Kai Li faced difficulties, Lu would resolve them with deadly efficiency. During the Lunar New Year of 1984, Lu represented his gang leader to collect profit shares from other gangs. His mere presence was enough to unsettle the room. Without a word, he pulled out a pistol and a grenade, intimidating everyone into silence. Liu walked out with the money, his boldness making him untouchable. His fearsome reputation spread across Asia, solidifying his status as a cold-blooded legend. However, living in the underworld comes with a price, and sooner or later, that price must be paid. On October 15th, 1984, following a major criminal case in Jiangnan, Taiwan launched a massive crackdown. In just one night, over 50 gang leaders were arrested, hundreds of key members were captured, and more than 3,000 individuals connected to organized crime were taken into custody. Liu Huanying, burdened by multiple criminal charges, became one of the most wanted men by the police. The relentless pressure from being hunted took a toll on him, and he began to notice that wherever he went, the police would arrive shortly after. He grew suspicious, believing there was a traitor within his ranks. After closely observing his circle, Liu concluded that Du Guolan was the most likely suspect. However, he wasn't certain. To test his theory, Liu devised a plan. He had recently bought a sports car and invited Lan to test drive it. Lan agreed, but on the scheduled day, Liu didn't show up. Instead, he watched from a high vantage point. As he expected, the police arrived shortly after Lan. Convinced that Lan had betrayed him, Liu's fury knew no bounds. A few days later, Liu organized a Hongmin banquet to confront Lan. During the gathering, Liu questioned him about his betrayal. Lan, of course, denied any wrongdoing, but Liu wasn't convinced. To force the truth, Liu cut off one of Lan's hands. Yet Lan remained silent, refusing to admit guilt. Ignoring Lan's pleas, Liu then severed the other hand. Realizing that Liu was a madman who wouldn't relent until he got the answer he wanted, Lan finally broke down. He confessed that the police knew about his involvement in the assassination of Yang Baifeng, and to protect himself, he had no choice but to cooperate with the authorities to bring down Liu Huanying. Lan believed that his close relationship with Liu, coupled with the loss of both his hands, would earn him some mercy. But Liu was no man of mercy. He dragged the nearly lifeless Lan into his car and drove to a remote road on the outskirts of town, where he shot him dead. To avoid drawing attention, Liu fled to the Philippines. But there, his bloodthirsty nature surfaced once again. Together with two members of the Bamboo Union, he targeted two wealthy brothers in the steel industry, whose assets were worth millions of dollars. They kidnapped the brothers and forced them to reveal their bank passwords. Once they had the money, they slaughtered the brothers without hesitation. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through both the Filipino and Taiwanese communities. The Philippine police immediately issued an arrest warrant for Liu Huanying. Realizing there was no safe haven left for him in the Philippines, Liu fled to Japan. But even there, he couldn't resist a life of crime. He collaborated with local gangs to smuggle drugs. Ultimately, Liu's downfall came when his own underworld associates betrayed him. He was arrested by Japanese police and deported back to Taiwan, where he was sentenced to death. But was Liu Huanying truly just a heartless killer? After his sentencing, many lawyers and elected representatives visited Liu, hoping to offer him assistance. They argued that most of his victims were fellow underworld figures, suggesting he deserved a chance at redemption. This revelation surprised the police. It turned out that Liu's life wasn't as straightforward as they believed. Despite his horrific crimes, there were times when Liu showed compassion. Through prison staff and his lawyers, the police learned that Liu had once taken refuge at a rundown kindergarten in Wufeng district. Seeing its dilapidated state, he donated money, obtained from gambling rackets, to help renovate the school. In June 1984, while hiding in a coal mine in Tuching District, New Taipei City, Liu heard of a devastating coal dust explosion that killed 74 miners. He donated the millions of Taiwan dollars he had on him to support the victims' families. Even in prison, Liu organized anonymous charity activities for the poor. His actions moved many social organizations who petitioned for him to be given a second chance at life. However, the law remained the law. Liu had to face the consequences of his actions. He was implicated in 9 shootings and accused of murdering 14 people. In 1991, he was sentenced to death. While awaiting execution, Liu wrote the story of his life in prison, donating the royalties to campaigns aimed at liberating women from prostitution. His final words, pinned behind bars, moved many to tears. One misstep can bring a lifetime of regret. By the time you turn back, it may already be too late. In March 1993, Liu Huaning was executed by firing squad in Taipei. In a final gesture of atonement, he donated all his organs before his death. His life was a complex tapestry of contradictions. Was he a ruthless killer or a righteous anti-hero? History may never offer a clear answer. All that can be said is that his life story evokes deep regret. Liu's choices reflect the darkness of that era. Perhaps if society had been more stable and he might never have walked such a deadly path. But what do you think about him? Wang Qingyun was born in 1956 in Changchun City, Jilin Province. She had two older sisters, a younger sister, and a younger brother. Coming from a large family, their living conditions were poor. The entire household relied solely on her father's meager income to survive. Watching her father grow weaker each day, Qingyun felt deeply distressed. She often helped her family with whatever she could. One day, while out collecting firewood, she accidentally slipped down a slope. Her leg went numb, and the pain was so intense that she screamed for help. Fortunately, a friend who had accompanied her quickly ran back to inform her family, and she was taken to the hospital in time. However, due to financial difficulties, she did not receive proper treatment. Her leg was only given basic medical attention before she was sent home to recover on her own. As a result, her condition worsened over time, leading to a permanent disability. As she grew up, Qingyun followed the typical path of many other women. She got married and had children. Despite their continued struggles with poverty, she had a loving husband who cared for her deeply, which gave her hope in life. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. When her daughter turned 18, Qingyun's husband passed away due to illness, leaving her with the entire burden of the family. With no source of income, Qingyun was forced to find work. However, because of her disability, many employers rejected her. Eventually, she managed to secure a job as a cleaner. But her busy work schedule meant she had little time to care for her daughter, son Jiayue, who gradually became rebellious. Almost every day, Jiayue would skip school to spend time at internet cafes playing online games. After multiple warnings that yielded no results, the school finally decided to expel Jiayue. Now, completely unsupervised, she became even more reckless. Not only did she chat with strangers online, but she also secretly traveled to Wuhan to live with a boyfriend she had met on the internet. When Qingyun found out, she was so furious that she fell seriously ill. However, her daughter remained firm in her decision and refused to return home. Eventually, Qingyun had no choice but to accept reality. She thought that if her daughter could find a stable place to settle down early on, it might not be such a bad thing. At the very least, she wouldn't have to suffer from poverty at home. From that point on, Qingyun lived alone. Looking at the empty house, she felt a deep sense of loneliness. Whenever she missed her daughter, she would talk to her through video calls. One day, while on a call with Jiayue, she noticed an injury on her daughter's face. It wasn't until later that she learned Jiayue had been abused by her boyfriend. That very afternoon, Qingyun immediately bought a bus ticket and set off for Wuhan. She had always believed her daughter was living a happy life, but when she finally saw her, she was heartbroken. Not only had Jiayue lost weight, but her mental state was also severely deteriorated. At that moment, Qingyun felt like a completely incompetent mother. What angered her even more was the discovery that Jiayue had become addicted to drugs. Worse still, after probing deeper, Qingyun learned that her daughter's boyfriend, Wang Hongliang, had a history of drug-related offenses. He had previously been sentenced for illegal drug possession, but had not changed his ways even after being released from prison. Upon arriving in Wuhan, he resumed his drug trafficking operations. He met Jiayue online and lured her in with sweet words, convincing her to move to Wuhan. At first, he treated her well, showering her with affection and care. However, As time passed, his interest in her faded, and he began neglecting her. Stranded in a foreign city, Jia Yue felt abandoned. With no one to rely on, she eventually fell into drug addiction. She relied on Wang Hongliang to supply her with drugs to satisfy her cravings. Of course, the drugs weren't free. Wang demanded that Jia Yue pay with her body. Otherwise, he would beat her. Seeing her daughter so frail and helpless, Qing Yun was devastated. She decided to take Jia Yue back home, hoping to help her overcome her addiction. However, Qing Yun herself was in poor health and had no job. They constantly struggled with financial difficulties. In a moment of despair, looking for a way to numb her emotions, Qing Yun tried taking a few puffs of the drugs her daughter was using. She never imagined that those few attempts would pull her into a dark abyss she could never escape. The turning point. To afford more drugs, Qing Yun even sold her own house. Despite multiple attempts to quit, she repeatedly failed. At times, she contemplated suicide, but the thought of leaving her daughter alone in the world always stopped her. In her desperation, a new idea crossed her mind. What if she became a drug dealer herself? That way, she wouldn't have to worry about money to buy drugs and could even make some profit. She then reached out to Wang Hongliang, her daughter's ex-boyfriend, and embarked on the path of drug trafficking. Qing Yun was meticulous in her operations. She researched online for secret transportation routes and personally handled all transactions to minimize risks. She never entrusted others with drug deliveries. To further ensure security, she rented multiple houses across Changchun City, using them as stash spots. Each shipment was carefully hidden in different locations, and whenever a customer came to pick up goods, Qing Yun would instruct her daughter or a trusted associate to complete the transaction, ensuring she never appeared in person. To avoid drawing police attention, she implemented strict self-imposed rules. No matter how familiar a client was, she never sold large quantities in a single transaction. This cautious approach allowed her to operate smoothly for many years. Her drug business reflected both the precision of a calculated mind and the recklessness of someone who had lost control of her life. As we all know, prolonged drug use often leads to erratic behavior, and Qing Yun was no exception. Even at 54 years old, she maintained relationships with over 10 young men who catered to her desires. Among them, her favorite was a young man named Bai Jin. At just 23 years old, Bai Jin was tall, handsome, and came from a well-off family. Under normal circumstances, he would have never ended up as the lover of a woman old enough to be his mother, especially since Qing Yun's appearance was rather ordinary. However, fate often takes unexpected turns. Bai Jin had fallen into drug addiction. After his family discovered this, they completely cut off his financial support. Left with no money, the unbearable withdrawal symptoms made it nearly impossible for him to continue using drugs. That was when he met Qing Yun, a drug dealer. Having lived in loneliness for years, Qing Yun was instantly attracted to Bai Jin. Learning about his predicament, she was overjoyed. She made him an irresistible offer. If he agreed to stay by her side, she would supply him with unlimited drugs for free. Not only that, but she would also give him money for his personal expenses. Although such a demand was difficult for a 20-year-old man to accept, the cravings from his addiction made it unbearable. After much deliberation, Bai Jin finally agreed. From that moment on, he became Wang Qingyun's kept man. Every time she touched him, he felt nauseous, especially when he was sober. Many times, he wanted to leave her, but whenever withdrawal symptoms kicked in, he had no choice but to return. Qing Yun understood his thoughts well. Every time he tried to leave, she had her own ways of punishing him. Once, when an exceptionally beautiful woman came to buy drugs, Bai Jin stole a few glances at her. Qing Yun immediately ordered him to have sex with her right in front of the woman. What was even more terrifying was that after it was over, Qing Yun demanded that Bai Jin, the woman, and another man named Xiao Jiang all have fun together. This lifestyle continued for more than 6 months, until Qing Yun met another young man named Zhao. Only then did Bai Jin's situation slightly improve. Aside from the dozen or so young men who satisfied her physical needs, Qing Yun also maintained relationships with various drug addicts. Those who couldn't afford drugs often visited her stash houses to get high for free. However, the condition was that they had to spend the night with her. As a result, there was always a group of men lingering around her places. Thanks to these men, Qingyun's drug business flourished, and she got everything she desired. However, as her operations expanded, rivals began to grow jealous. They sought ways to sabotage her. Some stole her shipments, while others reported her to the police. Unable to tolerate the harassment, Wang Qingyun decided to strengthen her own power. She recruited a group of recently released ex-convicts and formed a gang to protect her drug trafficking routes. With their assistance, her business became even smoother. Within just 2 years, she had risen to become the most powerful drug lord in the region. The underworld even gave her a notorious title, the Drug Queen. The reason was simple. Qingyun had access to all kinds of drugs. Whether it was powder, pills, or any other form, she could provide it. With such a diverse inventory, she expanded her business to Wuhan, Tianjin, Changchun, and several other cities. She wasn't just running the trade herself. She even pulled her own daughter, Sun Jiayue, into the business. Though Jiayue had already become frail from drug addiction, she remained determined to follow her mother's footsteps. Qingyun entrusted her daughter with private tasks such as collecting and distributing shipments. The process was methodical. Qingyun and her new lover, Zhao, would fly to Wuhan to pick up the drugs. Once they secured the goods, they would take a long-distance bus back to Changchun. At a rented apartment, Qingyun would divide the drugs into smaller portions before handing them over to Jiayue, who would then make deliveries to designated locations. This method had worked for many years. However, at around 10 a.m. on April 10th, a young woman named Chun Danfeng from Jilin province, introduced by a friend, arrived at one of Qingyun's stash houses to purchase drugs. Everything seemed to go smoothly, but the moment she stepped out of the building, she was surrounded by police. In reality, as early as 2009, law enforcement had received anonymous tips about Qingyun and her daughter's long-term drug trafficking operations in Changchun. Immediately, the police launched a secret investigation, which lasted over 5 months. Eventually, they gathered enough evidence to take them down. The authorities split into 2 teams. One followed Qingyun to Wuhan to track down and apprehend her drug supplier, while the other stayed behind in Changchun to monitor and arrest Qingyun and her associates. That day, officers had been waiting outside Wang Qingyun's residence for hours. As soon as Chun Danfeng appeared, they moved in and arrested her. From her possession, they seized 10.46 grams of meth and 12 ecstasy pills. With concrete evidence, the investigators stormed the apartment where Qingyun and her daughter were using drugs. Inside, they found 26.38 grams of meth and 125 ecstasy pills. Zhao, who was keeping watch outside, was also caught. When police searched his backpack, they discovered 205 grams of meth and a staggering 1,431 ecstasy pills. After Wang Qingyun was taken into custody, the Changchun police immediately notified their counterparts in Wuhan. The Wuhan officers did not disappoint. With the assistance of local authorities, they successfully captured Wang Hongliang, the man supplying Qingyun with drugs. At his residence, they seized 3,184 ecstasy pills, 11.75 grams of meth, and 53.9 grams of an unidentified white powder. One particularly disturbing discovery at Qingyun's apartment left the police in shock. When they stormed in, they found her inside a room with over 10 young men, all in good physical shape. Initially, officers assumed they were her bodyguards. However, upon questioning, they realized these men were not there for protection. They were her companions. Investigators soon learned that all of these young men were drug addicts. If they wanted free access to drugs, they had to sleep with Qingyun. In an attempt to justify her actions, Qingyun proudly compared herself to Empress Wu Zetian, claiming she was merely keeping young lovers like the ancient ruler. Hearing this, the police exchanged bewildered glances, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. But the shocking events didn't stop there. Sun Jiayue's behavior upon arrest was even more appalling than her mother's. After locating Jiayue, police followed her to a bathhouse. They spent nearly an entire day staking out the location before finally apprehending her. What happened next was beyond comprehension. Jia, in an act of sheer desperation, attempted to seduce the officers. She naively believed that her beauty could help her negotiate a lighter sentence. The dark side of the case. In the end, the police seized a total of 4,752 ecstasy pills, 253.6 grams of methamphetamine, 53.9 grams of black powder, 2 vehicles involved in drug trafficking, and 260,000 yuan in drug money. During the interrogation, Wang Qingyun tried to justify herself. She admitted that she knew drug trafficking was illegal, but she claimed she had no other choice due to her desperate circumstances. Qingyun insisted that she was forced into this path by her situation. She had many siblings, yet none of them ever offered to help her. In fact, she claimed that not a single one of them had ever given her even 100 yuan. She said she had tried to find a job, but due to her poor health, no one would even hire her as a nanny. In her statement, she described how, after experiencing the cold indifference of the world, she finally decided to take this route. What was truly sad was that, after choosing this path, Qingyun not only felt no remorse, but even found enjoyment in it. She admitted that using drugs not only brought her money, but also helped relieve the pain in her body. Even while in prison, Qingyun appeared cheerful. She confessed that in the past, she had always been alone at home, with no one to talk to. But now, in the detention center, she shared a space with 20 other inmates. The liveliness of the place made her feel less lonely. To someone who had spent years in isolation, this environment felt like paradise. One can only wonder how Sun Jiayue must have felt upon hearing these words from her mother. In the past, after losing her father's love, she had longed for affection from others. However, in her pursuit of external validation, she neglected her mother's emotions. After losing her husband and watching her daughter leave home, Qingyun also sank into despair. Left alone in an empty house, it was inevitable that her mental state would deteriorate. Perhaps everything in life happens for a reason. Yet, no matter the circumstances, breaking the law is never justified. There were always other paths she could have taken. It was Jiayue's downfall that led her mother down this irreversible path of crime. In the end, their fates were sealed and their punishment was deserved. However, many people still sympathized with their tragic and turbulent lives. And you, what do you think of this infamous mother-daughter duo? About a decade ago, a notorious gang terrorized the city of Handan, Hebei Province, China, the infamous Five Tigers of Handan. This gang committed a total of 40 criminal acts, leading to 1 death and severely injuring multiple individuals. At the time, the mere mention of Five Tigers of Handan instilled fear in the city's residents. Some were so terrified that they chose to relocate. Surprisingly, the leader of this ruthless gang was an otherwise unremarkable man named Zhao Xing. Zhao Xing was born on October 15, 1979, in Dingjia Village, Landau Town, Pingchong County, Sichuan Province. Due to financial difficulties, he had to drop out of school before graduating from middle school and started working at a young age. However, with little experience and limited education, he struggled to find stable employment. After years of odd jobs, he remained without a steady income. Frustrated and disillusioned, he eventually turned to a life of pleasure and indulgence. During this period, he befriended a group of reckless youths and began working as a protector in various establishments. On October 9, 2012, when troublemakers appeared at a venue he was overseeing, Zhao immediately dragged the instigator to the back of the premises and severely beat him, leaving the individual gravely injured. As a result, Zhao was sentenced to 6 months in prison. However, his time behind bars did nothing to change him. Upon release, he continued his old ways. Seeing the lucrative profits in loan sharking, he abandoned his job as a protector and forged his own path. Zhao gathered a group of ex-convicts and street delinquents, forming a network engaged in high-interest lending within gambling dens. This job was effortless for him. His men simply waited in casinos, watching for desperate gamblers who had lost everything. At the opportune moment, they would approach these individuals, sweet-talking them into borrowing money. Overwhelmed by the desire to recoup their losses, the gamblers rarely consider the risks of taking high-interest loans. Gambling is a bottomless pit, and escaping its grasp is nearly impossible. When someone is willing to lend them money, most defeated gamblers take it without hesitation. However, as the saying goes, 9 out of 10 bets end in loss. The real winners in casinos are always the house, with only a lucky few beating the odds. Yet, gamblers clung to the hope that they would be the exception, blind to the incredibly low probability of success. While gamblers continued to place reckless bets, Zhao and his gang simply waited patiently. The moment someone lost everything, they struck again. Normally, recovering debts from bankrupt individuals would be challenging, but not for Zhao and his crew. They employed every method imaginable, threats, intimidation, and even unlawful detention, to force debtors into repayment, driving many into despair. To settle their debts, many gamblers were forced to sell their homes and cars. Some even resorted to robbery to pay back what they owed. Through these brutal means, Zhao's gang amassed vast wealth. As his financial power grew, so did his ambitions. Seeking to expand his influence, he recruited members from other criminal syndicates, forming a fully fledged gang with himself at the helm. His core members included Ma Chao, Li Qing, Wang Yanling, and Lin Kan. To ensure loyalty, Zhao swore a brotherhood pact with his followers. This bond led the public to dub them the Five Tigers of Handan. As the gang's power grew, Zhao and his men virtually controlled all the gambling establishments in the area. Anyone wanting to open a casino in Handan had to seek their approval. Those who refused faced brutal beatings. One local man, Hone, dismissed these threats, believing that being a native exempted him from Zhao's control. He secretly opened an underground casino without Zhao's permission. However, no secret could escape Zhao's network. When Zhao discovered the operation, he was enraged and immediately sent men to disrupt Hone's business. Unexpectedly, authorities uncovered the illegal casino and shut it down before Zhao's men could act. Despite the closure, Zhao remained furious. He falsely claimed that his men had lost 300,000 yuan at Hone's casino and demanded compensation. Naturally, Hone refused, as his business had already been shuttered, leaving him without income. Determined to evade Zhao's control, Hone relocated to the outskirts of the city to reopen his casino in secret. What Hone didn't realize was that Zhao's influence extended beyond the city limits. One of Zhao's loan sharks happened to encounter Hone and immediately reported back. Enraged by what he saw as a direct challenge to his authority, Zhao assembled a group of men and stormed Hone's new establishment. They not only destroyed the casino, but also kidnapped Hone, taking him to a secluded building in Handan for negotiations over the alleged 300,000 yuan debt. Knowing it was a sham, Hone had no choice but to agree under duress. He promised to gather the money and signed an IOU before Zhao released him. A chain of crimes. Zhao's gang didn't stop at gambling rackets. They also ran illegal debt collection services. In 2013, a businessman named San, representing a company in Hanzhong County, found himself in financial trouble, owing over 1.4 billion yuan to a man named Lam from Yongnian County, Handan. Despite repeated demands for repayment, San consistently refused, claiming he had no money. Frustrated, Lam turned to Zhao for help. Zhao wasted no time. He sent his men to stalk and threaten San around the clock, leaving him too terrified to return home. After enduring 2 months of relentless harassment, San finally relented and repaid the full amount. But Zhao wasn't satisfied. He demanded additional fees, citing the labor costs of his enforcers. Out of fear, San paid an extra 5,000 yuan. Yet Zhao still wasn't done. He forced San to pay another 1,000 yuan for collection expenses and even seize San's car. Facing such blatant extortion, San was furious but remained silent, fearing retaliation against his family. Zhao's unchecked arrogance and brutality made it clear that his gang ruled Handan with an iron grip. His underlings became increasingly fearless, escalating conflicts at the slightest provocation. Around 1 a.m. on February 23, 2014, one of Zhao's men, Wang Hailin, was drinking with other gang members at a bar near Jiayuan Park in Handan's Fuxing district. While heading to the restroom, they accidentally bumped into another group of drinkers. Although it was a minor incident, Wang and his associates took great offense, sparking a brawl. After a brutal fight, both sides suffered injuries and had to seek medical attention. However, Wang couldn't accept the humiliation. He immediately called Zhao to report the incident. Furious, Zhao mobilized around 30 men to take revenge. They stormed the hospital where the injured rivals were receiving treatment and launched a vicious assault. Fortunately, hospital security intervened in time, preventing any fatalities. On February 27, 2014, around 3 p.m., another incident unfolded in Jinzhuang Village, Handan City. A man named Hai hired Xing to send some people to teach a lesson to the owner of a billiards hall named Su, who had been bad-mouthing him. Xing immediately dispatched his underlings to the billiards hall. The moment they stepped inside, they started causing trouble, terrifying all the customers into fleeing in panic. The staff tried to intervene, but before they could act, they were beaten down by the thugs. During the chaos, one of Xing's men, Kuei, got injured, which infuriated him. He quickly called Xing, demanding that Su be punished. Zhao Xing, known for fiercely protecting his crew, arranged to meet Su that evening at the gate of Hospital 285 in Handan to settle the score with force. But Su wasn't one to back down either. That night, both sides showed up with about 20 to 30 men each, ready for a confrontation. The brawl that ensued was brutal, with nearly everyone sustaining serious injuries. Fortunately, since it happened right in front of the hospital, the doctor's timely intervention ensured no one died. Xing and his gang's behavior was nothing short of reckless. They didn't care about the place or the situation when they decided to teach someone a lesson. Stories like this were countless. Under Zhao Xing's command, his lackeys grew accustomed to acting arrogantly, as if they owned the world. Even a casual encounter with them could easily land someone in serious trouble. On January 18, 2015, Xing and a few of his men were cruising around in an SUV, looking for something to do. By lunchtime, they started debating where to eat. While waiting, their driver parked outside a small shop selling tobacco and liquor. The shop's owner, Mrs. Zhang, noticed the car and initially thought they were customers. But after waiting for a while and seeing no one get out, she began to sense something was off. Though she didn't want to make a fuss, the car was blocking her shop's entrance, affecting her business. So, Mrs. Zhang politely asked the driver to move the vehicle to the side. Little did she know, her courteous request would lead to disaster. The moment she spoke, a group of young men jumped out of the car, shoved her back in her shop, and started beating her. They spat on her, hit her, and shouted at her not to meddle in their territory. They didn't care that Mrs. Zhang was an elderly woman. They kept beating and yelling at her until their anger subsided, then left her battered on the floor. Victims of this gang, intimidated by Xing's power, rarely dared to report them to the police, which only made Xing's crew more brazen. In just a few years, they committed 40 crimes, severely disrupting the lives and livelihoods of the local people. But the price for their actions would eventually come due. On April 9, 2015, a knife attack orchestrated by Xing and his gang caught the police's attention. The victim, a young man named Yang, worked at a casino owned by Huan. Huan had verbally promised to pay Xing 300,000 yuan as compensation, but had no intention of following through. It was just empty words. Huan discussed the issue with Yang, hoping he'd come up with a solution. Yang, a man of integrity, immediately declared he'd stand up for his boss. He called Guang, one of Zhao Xing's underlings, and arranged to meet on South Ring Road in Handan. Both sides prepared thoroughly before the meeting. Yang assumed Guang would only bring a few men, but when he arrived, he was stunned to see South Ring Road packed with a massive crowd, over 100 people on Guang's side. Meanwhile, Yang had only brought 6 men. Realizing the odds were stacked against him, Yang didn't even get out of the car. He floored it and sped away. But in his hasty escape, he accidentally hit a few of Guang's men while reversing, which made the situation far worse than he could have imagined. When Zhao Xing heard about it, he ordered a manhunt for Yang, forcing him into hiding. On April 9th, one of Xing's men, Kuei, spotted Yang near the Zhaoshang Hotel in Handan. After reporting to Xing, Kuei was instructed to tail Yang with 6 others. They followed him to the Feixiang area, and when they saw no one else around, they didn't hesitate. They charged at Yang, wielding 3-edged knives, and slashed him mercilessly. Yang was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. He had lost too much blood and didn't survive. Such a brazen armed attack near a commercial hub in broad daylight drew intense scrutiny from the authorities. The Handan City Public Security Bureau immediately mobilized over 70 officers, forming the Task Force 414 to investigate the case. After relentless evidence gathering, Zhao Xing's gang came under the police's radar. On April 10th, Xing was arrested. The investigation into the crimes of the 5 Tigers of Handan gang deepened. By April 19th, the gang's key members were rounded up one by one. In the months that followed, the task force tirelessly pursued related suspects in areas like Hanshan and Songtai. By December that year, arrest warrants were issued for the remaining 33 suspects. By January 2016, out of 152 involved individuals, 145 had been apprehended. The police gradually uncovered the full extent of the gang's criminal operations. For years, this organized crime syndicate, led by Zhao Xing, had run multiple casinos in Handan's outskirts and city center, engaged in loan sharking, and committed over 40 organized crimes. Public brawls were a regular occurrence, too many to count. On July 12, 2018, the provincial court publicly tried the case involving this criminal organization. Zhao Xing was convicted of leading a mafia-style syndicate, intentional injury, extortion, and numerous other charges. He was sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve and had all his personal assets confiscated. Over 150 other members of the organization were also tried, receiving sentences ranging from life imprisonment to 5 years and 6 months in prison, depending on their crimes. With that, the 5 Tigers of Handan gang, which had terrorized the region for years, was finally dismantled. Zhao Xing, the gang's leader, had started from humble beginnings, but instead of seeking an honest path, he chose the dark road of crime. Gambling, loan sharking, and other illegal activities not only ruined countless lives, but also trapped him and his crew in an inescapable cycle of violence. In the end, the price Xing paid for his crimes was a death sentence, but even that couldn't erase the pain and suffering he inflicted on his victims. Around 2015, short video live streaming platforms began to grow rapidly, leading to the emergence of numerous social media celebrities. However, beyond the prominent figures, a dark underworld surfaced, known as the Internet Mafia. One such individual formed a gang, recruited members, and engaged in nefarious activities. The gang was infamously named the Tu Neo Family Army, a name that sounded chaotic but lacked any sense of sophistication. On the morning of April 9th, 2018, the police in Guiyang City, Guizhou Province, received a report from residents. A recreational venue had been vandalized by dozens of individuals armed with knives and firearms, who also destroyed cars at the scene. By the time police arrived, all suspects had fled. A vehicle on site was severely damaged, with many of its parts destroyed. Additionally, 2 individuals in the car were injured, their faces covered in blood. When interrogated, the 2 injured individuals displayed strange behavior, deliberately avoiding details and refusing to clarify the situation. They insisted it was a minor misunderstanding and not a major issue. Their suspicious behavior aroused the police's doubts, and their story was deemed unreliable. Based on experience, the police deduced that something was amiss. After a series of intense interrogations, they discovered that the 2 individuals were involved in a competitive business conflict. Both were engaged in covertly distributing business cards to solicit prostitutes in hotels and inns. Their territorial overlap led to clashes between the 2 factions. One of the victims recalled that the opposing gang not only used long knives and sticks, but also fired a loud shot into the air. This revelation shocked the police as they now faced issues of assault, organized prostitution, and potential illegal possession of firearms. Surveillance footage showed the opposing group using unlicensed vehicles. By tracking the movements of the vehicles entering and leaving the scene, the primary suspect was identified as Huang Jiahao, a 22-year-old with the alias Tunyo. The gang leader Tunyo and his accomplices were swiftly apprehended. The police raided their hideout, breaking down the door and storming inside. Although Tunyo attempted to escape, the officers ensured no one got away. They confiscated a modified gun, 101 bullets, and several long knives. In addition to this, they found makeshift imitation firearms and a large number of prostitution business cards. During interrogations, Huang Jiahao and his accomplices provided information about other members of their organization. This confirmed the existence of a criminal gang led by Huang, alias Tunyo. The gang, commonly referred to as the Extreme Bull Family Army, derived its name from the Guiyang dialect. The term Tunyo not only symbolized a native bull, but also connoted strength and aggressiveness, qualities Huang adopted as his personal moniker. Through these interrogations, police discovered that the gang had committed numerous crimes and violated multiple laws. Acting on this information, a full-scale investigation was launched, culminating in a large-scale operation. All remaining members of this criminal gang were apprehended. Hao, a 22-year-old man from Habang Village, Shanban Town, Huaxi County, Guiyang Province, has a criminal history. He had been convicted multiple times for armed robbery and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. After being released in 2015, Tunyo quickly capitalized on the explosive growth of a burgeoning short video platform. This coincided with the rise of the so-called internet hackers, an underground subculture filled with extreme content about gang wars. Tunyo became a prominent figure in this dark internet underworld. His prior convictions became a badge of pride, showcasing his fearless, street-smart reputation, setting him apart from other keyboard warriors who merely pretended to live a gangster lifestyle to gain views. Tunyo genuinely delved into the criminal world, establishing a gang to attract like-minded individuals. He expanded his notoriety through various media channels. As the leader of the Tunyo family army, he aggressively promoted his gang. To build a fearsome image, the gang's core members were armed with machetes and illegal firearms. They adorned themselves with striking tattoos and large, sharp gold chains, hallmarks of the criminal underworld. Beyond posting videos of crafting and handling makeshift weapons, the gang showcased illegal firearms and other weapons to intimidate others and bolster their activities. This content was regularly updated starting in 2017 as Tunyo sought to elevate his reputation at all costs. His uploaded videos exceeded 2,000, featuring a mix of violence and variety that attracted a massive online following. In addition to producing unique videos, Tunyo leveraged live streaming platforms to broadcast his activities directly. These live streams earned him hundreds of thousands of yuan per session. The Extreme Tunyo family army drew significant attention, including from individuals with criminal records. The gang consisted of 16 official members, most around 18 years old. Some were even minors, proudly identifying themselves as fierce warriors of the Tunyo clan. The gang went so far as to hire a rapper to compose a custom war song for them, operating primarily near Habang Village, Huaxi County. The gang had long been active in the area. Their primary income stemmed from resolving disputes, issuing threats, and engaging in illegal activities like debt collection and extortion. However, Tunyo's ambitions didn't stop there. The extremist gang began expanding its operations to other parts of Guiyang City. Since 2016, the gang had been involved in organizing illegal prostitution, coercing women, and conducting illicit transactions. They also participated in fraudulent schemes to deceive clients out of their money. For Tunyo, fame and fortune were inseparable. He believed that as long as he expanded his reputation, wealth would naturally follow. Driven by this mindset, he was ready to fight and seize every opportunity for external success. At 6 a.m. on December 17, 2017, Tunyo received an unexpected call from a friend. The friend shared that he had been mistreated by someone, which infuriated Tunyo. Surveillance footage revealed Tu Nyo storming into a bathhouse, carrying a long wrapped object in his hand. Upon finding his friend, he unwrapped the object to reveal a flintlock gun. Tu Nyo fired 2 consecutive shots, leaving his opponent stunned and unable to resist the robbery. Afterward, he assaulted staff members and strutted out with a self-satisfied air like a victor. The next major incident occurred on September 5th and 6th, 2017, when the Tu Nyo family army invaded the restaurant district near a university. The gangs sought to extort protection fees and establish control over the area. Any establishment that refused to cooperate faced severe consequences. During peak dining hours, Tu Nyo gathered dozens of gang members to occupy restaurants. They took up all available seats, with each person monopolizing an entire table, leaving customers unable to find seating or dine. Students, the main clientele near universities, were the most affected. This scene of gang members forming groups, chanting slogans and driving patrons away, left both residents and restaurant owners in shock and fear. The gang's actions were so intimidating that ordinary people, including students, avoided the area altogether. As a result, no one dared to visit the affected establishments, causing significant financial losses for the owners. Tu Nyo took pride in his actions and decided to upload this content to social media. On March 19th, 2018, a confrontation broke out between members of Tu Nyo's gang and an employee at a karaoke bar. Following the altercation, Tu Nyo led a group of his brothers to the venue. He chased down the employee, identified as Zhu, and attacked him with a knife. Zhu was stabbed twice in the head and required over 20 stitches at the hospital. The injuries were classified as second-degree minor trauma by doctors. Early in the morning on April 9th, 2018, gang members spotted a man sitting in a car near Kwanshan Lake. They occasionally visited hotels and inns in the area to facilitate prostitution activities, marking the territory as their own. At the scene, Tu Nyo and his accomplices used 2 vehicles to launch an attack, leading the charge with a firearm. Tu Nyo advanced while others wielded knives and machetes. They viciously destroyed their opponent's car, leaving 2 men inside injured. These events prompted bystanders to call the police, as mentioned earlier in the video. However, during the investigation, police uncovered substantial evidence of the gang's crimes from Tu Nyo's mobile phone, including incriminating photos and videos the gang had taken and stored. The gang's acts of brutality and violence, ranging from intimidation to physical harm, had far exceeded the boundaries of societal acceptance. The scope of their crimes was beyond what anyone had imagined. The feud between the 2 gangs remained unclear, but the Tu Nyo gang attacked with the ferocity of a rampaging bull. They relentlessly beat their rivals until they were left writhing in pain. Tu Nyo showed no regard for gender in his violent behavior. In one video, he was seen using a stone to injure a woman's hand, hitting her head, and even setting her hair on fire. According to Tu Nyo's confession, he intended to publish these videos online, but the platform rejected them and forced him to delete the content. Ultimately, all of this became irrefutable evidence against Tu Nyo. He had personally recorded these actions, even carrying his own law enforcement recorder. His mobile phone contained numerous recordings of illegal detainment and intentional harm. On December 28th, 2018, at the Kwanshan Lake District People's Court in Guiyang, a highly publicized trial took place. 12 individuals, including Huang Jiahao, were charged with participating in underground organizations that endangered public safety as defined by the law. The heinous crimes associated with this group included organizing prostitution, facilitating prostitution, and the illegal manufacture of firearms. They were also accused of assault, battery, robbery, and unlawful detention. Among the defendants, Huang Jiahao was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his grave offenses. Additionally, he was fined 55,000 yuan, and all his personal assets were confiscated. Other defendants received prison sentences ranging from 1 year to 6 months. On March 21st, 2019, the Guiyang Intermediate People's Court upheld the original verdict, reaffirming the fairness and authority of the legal system in addressing these crimes. In 2012, the strategic concept of Internet was proposed, aiming to provide traditional industries with new development opportunities through integration with the Internet. In the virtual online world, people can earn substantial money through their activities. However, these individuals became captivated and lost in this virtual realm, turning their pursuits into a harsh reality marked by brutality and cruelty. This serves as a cautionary tale for many young people today who are addicted to the internet, living in a virtual reality and acting as keyboard warriors. Be mindful and alert about this virtual game, as it can enchant and mislead you at any moment. The MS-13 gang is infamous for its brutal killings with machetes, drug trafficking, prostitution, and other criminal activities. Most new members of MS-13 in the United States are middle or high school students from immigrant communities. This criminal organization thrives by spreading poison into American society, trafficking children for sexual exploitation, and committing horrific violence in the neighborhoods where they operate, said U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions before meeting with federal officials to discuss strategies for eliminating the gang from American society. MS-13, also known as Mara Salvatrucha, was formed in Los Angeles in the 1980s following a massive wave of migration driven by the Civil War in El Salvador. Information gathered after a large-scale crackdown by Salvadoran police revealed that MS-13 generates up to $31.2 million annually from illegal activities. Under the Obama administration, despite an increase in MS-13 arrests in both the U.S. and El Salvador, the gang became stronger than ever. Initially, its members were mainly Salvadoran immigrants. They competed with M18, a Mexican-American gang, for territory. Through this violent struggle, MS-13 expanded rapidly and became one of the most organized and violent gangs in the United States. To further expand, MS-13 recruited refugees from other Central American countries. The gang is notorious for recruiting children as young as 8, with total membership exceeding 100,000. Betrayal is punished with death or the severing of limbs. In 1999, Brenda Paz, a 13-year-old Honduran immigrant, joined a local MS-13 faction in Los Angeles. She later fled to Virginia in 2002 with her boyfriend and was arrested for car theft. Her boyfriend, Dennis Rivera, was a high-ranking MS-13 member in Northern Virginia and a suspect in the brutal beheading of a teenager named Joaquin Diaz. At 17, Paz agreed to provide internal information about the gang in exchange for protection under the Federal Witness Protection Program. In a series of recorded interrogations, Paz detailed MS-13's crimes. However, she felt isolated within the program and was eventually lured back into the gang. At the time, her boyfriend, imprisoned and awaiting trial for Diaz's murder, plotted to have her killed. In July 2003, a fisherman discovered the bloodied body of a young woman along the Shenandoah River in Virginia. It was Brenda Paz, 17 weeks pregnant and stabbed 16 times. MS-13's expanding influence extended even into prisons. In the U.S., the gang dominated cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York, New Jersey, and Houston. The gang became a significant threat in North America, prompting the U.S. government to begin deporting members back to Central America. However, this strategy backfired. Deported criminals returned to El Salvador, recruited new members, and then re-entered the U.S. illegally, leading to a surge in suburban crime. This forced the FBI to establish a special task force to suppress the gang. Despite efforts to control it, the gang continued to grow. In October 2012, the U.S. Treasury Department froze MS-13's financial assets and designated it a transnational criminal organization. In El Salvador, MS-13's power extended into prisons. Members were given their own cells, and even guards were too afraid to enter. The Pena Ciudad Barrios prison was reserved exclusively for MS-13 members. In 2014, a decade after the Salvadoran government attempted to separate the territories of MS-13 and rival gang Barrio 18, the move was deemed a failure. This decision came after a massacre in 2004, where 32 members from both gangs were killed and beheaded in prison, the deadliest prison massacre in El Salvador's history. Determined to eliminate MS-13, U.S. President Donald Trump recently declared a full-scale war against the gang, which he said had thrived under Barack Obama. According to The Sun, MS-13, now boasting around 100,000 members, had become Trump's #1 enemy on American soil. Trump vowed to wipe out the gang, no matter the challenges. We cannot allow this to continue. We will secure our borders, intensify immigrant crackdowns, and cut off financial supplies to this gang, Attorney General Sessions stated. And if you're a member of MS-13, we will find you. On July 28, 2017, President Trump reiterated his determination to eliminate MS-13, which has about 10,000 members in the United States. Most members are immigrants from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, including some born in the U.S. According to Montgomery County Court on November 22nd, police arrested suspect Miguel Angel Lopez Abrego, 19, along with approximately 10 other MS-13 gang members. They were accused of brutally murdering, decapitating, and removing the heart of a man before burying his body in a park near Washington, D.C. Though the victim's identity has not been disclosed, police reported that he was stabbed over 100 times by MS-13 members in Wheaton Regional Park, Maryland. According to police, the gang used walkie-talkies to coordinate the attack. They lured the victim to Wheaton Regional Park and carried out the murder. His body was discovered on September 5th in a pre-dug grave within the forest of the park. Authorities believe the victim was likely a Hispanic man from Annapolis, Maryland. The Washington Post reported that the murder took place in early September, but police only learned about it after receiving a tip. The informant led officers to the burial site. Subsequently, Miguel Angel Lopez Abrego was arrested on November 11th in North Carolina. More than 10 days later, on November 22nd, he was charged with first-degree murder and is currently in custody for further interrogation. According to Maryland Assistant State Attorney Kelly McGann, suspect Miguel Angel Lopez Abrego was the first to stab the victim in the chest, and police recovered a 40-centimeter knife used in the crime. Authorities are still hunting for the remaining suspects. This murder occurred during a nationwide crackdown operation in which police arrested 214 MS-13 members who were charged with crimes including murder, robbery, and drug trafficking. According to media reports, MS-13 has become a central focus of President Donald Trump's campaign against organized crime. In a speech on July 28th in Long Island, New York, President Trump referred to MS-13 members as animals and condemned their horrific crimes. We will restore safety to our streets and peace to our communities. We will eliminate the cowardly MS-13 gang and others like them. They kidnap, extort, rob, and rape. They beat their victims with bats, hack them with knives, and have turned peaceful parks and beautiful neighborhoods into blood-soaked killing fields, Trump declared. Attorney General Jeff Sessions also expressed his determination to eradicate MS-13, frequently highlighting the gang's dangerous nature and its links to illegal immigration. On August 12, 2017, the FBI announced the capture of Walter Yovani Gomez, an MS-13 member from Woodbridge, Virginia, after 4 years on the run. Gomez, originally from Honduras, had entered the U.S. illegally and was one of the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives. He was wanted in connection with the brutal murder of Julio Matute, a rival gang member, on May 8, 2011, in Plainfield, New Jersey. The FBI had offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to Gomez's arrest. The FBI accused MS-13 of focusing primarily on extortion, drug trafficking, and local theft while maintaining connections with transnational Mexican drug cartels. Given the complexity and danger of the gang, the FBI had to establish a specialized unit dedicated to combating MS-13. The Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS, once declared MS-13 one of the 20 most dangerous gangs in the United States, estimating that about 500 members operated in Texas under a regional cell model. From 2012 to 2017, the U.S. Treasury Department classified MS-13 as a transnational criminal organization. The Treasury Department also imposed sanctions on 6 MS-13 leaders. Among them was Borromeo Enrique Enriquez Solorzano, known as El Diablo Pequeño or El Diablito de Hollywood. Despite being imprisoned in El Salvador, he was still considered the gang's Central American leader. The FBI formed a specialized task force to tackle MS-13. Chris Swecker, head of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division, stated, "We don't view MS-13 as just another gang. Two distinct characteristics make them especially concerning. First, they are extremely violent. Second, they have evolved into an international organization, present not just in most U.S. states, but also in 5 Central American countries. And now, they have begun to emerge in Europe." The initial strategy to combat MS-13 was mass deportation, which inadvertently led to a rapid spread of MS-13 branches in Mexico and Central America. The gang's membership surged to an estimated 50,000 members. In Honduras, MS-13 once hijacked a bus and executed 28 passengers. Despite its flaws, deportation remains a crucial component of U.S. policy. Under Operation Community Shield, launched 9 months ago, over 1,600 gang members, more than half of them from MS-13, were arrested, with most being deported from the U.S. However, according to Ismail Cisnerin, deportation is not an effective solution. They deported me, and I came back. Everyone they deport will find a way to return to the U.S. He admitted that before Brenda's murder, he had been deported to Mexico after stabbing someone in Virginia in 2012. The sole witness in Brenda's murder, who testified against the perpetrators in exchange for amnesty, now faces deportation. His attorneys, Frank Salvato and Alex Leve, are fighting to keep him in the United States. He risked his life to testify and help capture the murderers of Brenda. In doing so, he placed both his own life and his family's in grave danger. "We are genuinely worried about what could happen to him if he is deported back to El Salvador," the attorneys expressed. In an interview with the television show 60 Minutes, the witness shared his fears. "I'm terrified. They will kill me. My family will be in danger. I have nowhere left to run." Brenda's close friend, who also agreed to testify against MS-13, was asked how likely she thought it was that she would survive. She responded, "There's no chance. I can protect myself and hide from the gang for now. But once they find me, believe me, they won't show me even the slightest mercy." When asked by the 60 Minutes interviewer if she believed she could survive another 2 years, she silently nodded. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security maintains that deportation is a useful tool, especially when police lack sufficient evidence for formal prosecution and arrests. However, in September of this year, the FBI launched a coordinated raid targeting MS-13 across 5 countries, capturing and neutralizing 650 suspects within 24 hours. Inspector Chris Swecker stated, "A realistic time frame for crippling MS-13 is probably 3 to 5 years. We may not be able to eliminate them entirely, but our main goal is to push them into a situation where they can no longer freely commit crimes anywhere, at any time, as they do now." Additionally, the Central and Southern California Prosecutor's Office issued a 78-page indictment, charging 21 MS-13 members and associates operating in the Los Angeles area. The defendants were accused of engaging in violent acts, including murdering rivals and targeting those who cooperated with law enforcement in various violent incidents across Southern California. MS-13's infamous motto is Mata, Viola, Controla, Kill, Rape, Control. When it comes to murder, MS-13 members prefer to use cold weapons like knives and machetes. To expand their territory, MS-13 actively recruits refugees from Central American countries. The gang's initiation process for new members is notoriously brutal, consisting of 2 horrifying steps. First, new recruits must endure a violent beating from senior members that lasts exactly 13 seconds. Then, the initiates are required to commit a crime for the gang, which is often murder. Once the initiation is complete, new members are permanently marked with tattoos on their faces, chests, and across their bodies, making their affiliation unmistakable. Some MS-13 factions will go as far as executing anyone who dares to defect from a gang. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, MS, 13 members are present in 46 out of 50 U.S. states. A 2008 FBI report estimated that MS-13 had between 6,000 to 10,000 members in the United States, making it one of the largest criminal organizations in the country. However, MS-13's influence stretches far beyond U.S. borders. The FBI reports that the gang has over 60,000 members across Central America. Salvadoran police estimate that MS-13 generates around $31.2 million annually for drug trafficking, extortion, and human trafficking. In October 2012, the U.S. Department of the Treasury froze MS-13's financial accounts and officially designated it as a transnational criminal organization. MS-13 became the first street gang to be considered as dangerous as major international criminal groups like Mexico's Zetas, Japan's Yakuza, and Italy's Mafia organizations. Because of its reputation for violence, MS-13 earned the trust of the Sinaloa Cartel, one of the largest and most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world. The cartel frequently hired MS-13 to carry out revenge killings, drug trafficking, human smuggling, and acts of sexual violence. On December 3, 2022, Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele deployed a security force of 10,000 soldiers and agents in an effort to dismantle what was believed to be a major criminal stronghold in a suburb of San Salvador, the country's capital. After nearly a year, Mexican authorities captured a high-ranking MS-13 leader who had been on the United States Most Wanted list. Elmer Canales Rivera, also known as the Hollywood Thug, a senior leader of the MS-13 criminal network, was arrested in Mexico and extradited to the United States, according to sources from the U.S. Embassy, as reported by AFP on November 10, 2023. According to crime research organization Insight Crime, citing sources in Tapachula, Canales Rivera was arrested in Tapachula, a city near the Mexico-Guatemala border. The area is known as a key route for illegal migration. Canales Rivera had previously been imprisoned in El Salvador, but was never extradited to the United States. Despite facing charges that could have led to a 40-year sentence, he was quietly released in November 2021 and immediately fled the country. President Nayib Bukele later shared the news of Canales Rivera's capture on social media, but did not provide further details. According to Stephen Dudley, a researcher at the Latin American Center at American University in Washington, Canales Rivera was one of MS-13's 12 historical leaders, second only to the gang's highest-ranking leader, Borromeo Enrique Enriquez. Within the organization, Canales Rivera was considered the second most powerful figure. Wu Di was born in 1965 in Hong Kong. As a child, he had a dream to wear a military uniform and fight on the battlefield. During that time, being a soldier was one of the most prestigious professions, admired by many young boys. Like most of them, Di was filled with ambition to join the military, dreaming that one day he would become an excellent soldier. He even aspired to be a general commanding thousands of troops. However, for a boy born into an ordinary family, enlisting in the army was not easy, as recruitment was highly selective. Many families had to go to great lengths to secure a spot for their children in the military. But surprisingly, Wu Di managed to fulfill his dream without any connections. At that time, the local government organized an arts performance for recruitment officers. Wu Di, who was in the 10th grade, participated in the event with a solo performance on the pipa. A recruitment officer, impressed by his musical talent, approached the school principal and inquired whether the student on stage would be interested in joining the army. If he agreed, he could leave with them immediately. When the school principal relayed the news to Wu Di, he couldn't believe it was real. Overwhelmed with excitement, he rushed home to tell his mother, who was equally shocked. And so, at the age of 16, Wu Di became an artist in the military. However, once in the army, Wu Di felt a deep sense of disappointment. Life in the military during peacetime was nothing like he had imagined. No smoke, no war, no thrilling battles. Instead, his days consisted of physical training and ideological studies, which soon made him feel restless and unfulfilled. Dee even began to regret joining the army. As time passed, in 1985, his unit underwent structural reforms, and he seized the opportunity to leave without hesitation. After being discharged, he was assigned to work at a textile factory in Shijiazhuang. However, the intense labor at the factory proved unbearable. He had to stand for long hours with very few breaks. Moreover, at the time, the factory was rudimentary, with extreme heat, deafening noise, and clouds of fabric dust in the air. These conditions constantly tested Dee's patience. Not long after, he resigned and returned home, from an unknown nobody to an underworld kingpin. As he wandered aimlessly without a job, a visit from a friend opened his eyes to a new business opportunity. His friend arrived wearing a chiffon t-shirt and stylish trousers. Dee knew his friend worked in the fashion industry, but he was astonished to hear that within just 6 months, the man had earned 80,000 yuan, a fortune at the time that most families couldn't accumulate in a lifetime. That moment sparked an idea in Dee's mind: selling clothes. The very next morning, he found himself a stall in the youth market and started a wholesale clothing business. With his gift of persuasion, it didn't take long before Dee accumulated his first real savings. He soon began looking for even more profitable ventures. At that time, people's living conditions had improved significantly, and they had more disposable income. As a result, entertainment became an essential part of urban life. Bathhouses and karaoke lounges were flourishing in major cities, drawing in crowds eager for new and exciting experiences. This surge in entertainment demand marked a golden age for the industry. Seizing the opportunity, Dee ventured into the food and entertainment sector. He not only opened a renowned restaurant called Grand Red Lantern, but also ran a luxury bathhouse and a high-end karaoke bar in the city's prime location. From that point on, Wu Dee's name became well known, and he rose to prominence in the business world of Shijiazhuang. However, as we all know, the entertainment and bathhouse industries at that time were riddled with illegal activities and hidden dangers. At first, Dee remained focused on running his businesses properly, improving the quality of food, refining customer service, and ensuring top-tier experiences. But human greed knows no bounds. Over time, he became dissatisfied with legal profits and sought ways to make even more money. He soon strayed down a dark path. Dee frequently arranged for the women working at his bathhouse to engage in illicit services. In 2001, under his management, a luxury hotel named Golden Empire officially opened in Shijiazhuang. The hotel had various departments, including reception, office administration, technician services, housekeeping, and finance. From the outside, it appeared like a regular high-end hotel, but behind closed doors, it was a hub of illegal activities. The hotel's primary source of revenue was not room bookings, but rather the special services provided by technicians. Dee recruited and allowed many female masseuses to work there. During massage sessions, if a customer complimented a technician's beauty and hinted at extra services, the masseuse would subtly suggest an additional charge for 2 special services. These transactions were disguised as legal massage fees on receipts. Dee even implemented a number system for the technicians. The numbers were not random. Those numbered 1 to 100 were assigned to women providing illegal services, while numbers above 100 belonged to legitimate masseuses. These technicians did not receive a fixed salary. Their income was entirely commission-based. Every 10 days, Dee would distribute earnings to the women based on a 40 to 60 revenue split. The masseuses received 40%, while Dee took 60%. Additionally, he used some of the earnings to purchase condoms, which he then resold to the workers for 1 yuan each. According to records, the hotel ordered up to 2 boxes of condoms every month, each containing 576 packs, totaling 3,456 condoms. The sheer volume of transactions revealed just how extensive Dee's illicit operations were. Through these activities, Wu Dee managed to amass a fortune of 2.08 billion yuan over the years. In business, conflicts are inevitable. To protect his interests, D gathered a group of delinquent youths and formed a criminal gang with deep underworld ties. He repeatedly organized illegal activities such as disturbing public order and unlawful detainment. What was shocking was that despite his criminal background, D was praised by the local media as a leading figure in the bathhouse industry in Shijiazhuang. In 2006, he was even elected as the first president of the Shijiazhuang Bathhouse Industry Association, a truly ironic twist. Aside from providing illicit services, D's gang expanded their operations into gambling. In 2015, he crossed paths with another crime lord named Liu. After several meetings, the two found they shared the same ambitions. During one conversation, Liu mentioned that running a casino was far more profitable than the sex trade. Seizing the opportunity, they partnered up and opened a casino in the basement of a building in Shijiazhuang. D handled external relations, while Liu managed the day-to-day operations. Their collaboration was seamless. After gaining experience in the industry, D went on to establish 6 more casinos in different locations. These casinos were managed with extreme security measures. To gain entry, guests had to pass through rigorous inspections. The casino had 4 large entrance gates, each monitored by security cameras and guarded by staff. When a familiar gambler arrived, the guards would use walkie-talkies to relay a coded message to the next checkpoint, only if the correct code was given with the next gate open. This process continued through all 4 gates, and the security codes were changed daily. Additionally, patrol guards were stationed outside the casino. Whenever police or law enforcement vehicles were spotted nearby, the guards would immediately alert their colleagues via walkie-talkies, ensuring everyone inside had time to react. If entering the casino was already difficult, what awaited inside was even more tightly controlled. The main hall was guarded by 5 to 6 muscular men responsible for security. The casino provided 5-star treatment to its high rollers, especially those traveling from far away. Not only were their accommodation and travel expenses reimbursed, but they were also offered free meals, an incentive to keep them gambling for as long as possible. For those who dared to cause trouble, these gangs showed no mercy. They resorted to violence, severe beatings, and even death threats against their families. In 2016, a gambler named Wang fell victim to one of these rigged games, losing nearly 2 million yuan. When his wife discovered the enormous debt, she couldn't bear the stress and attempted suicide by overdosing on pills. Fortunately, she was saved in time. After surviving, Wang's wife realized that their only hope for justice was to go to the police. She urged her husband to report the crime immediately. When Wang finally realized he had been scammed, he followed his wife's advice and went to the police. However, the moment he stepped out of the police station, he was already being watched. These men swiftly abducted him, dragging him to a hotel where he was detained. There, they threatened his life and ordered him to stay silent. If he refused, they promised to kill his entire family. Terrified, Wang ultimately submitted to their demands. His story was not unique. Countless others suffered the same fate. One such victim was Li, who was also scammed at D's casino and tried to reclaim his losses. On December 19, 2017, he lost 100,000 yuan. Frustrated, he realized he had been tricked and decided to confront the casino. After arguing with the staff multiple times, he was warned to stay away or face dire consequences. Li, however, did not take the threat seriously. He believed that persistence would pressure them into returning his money. 3 days later, he returned to the casino once more. This time, D lost patience and ordered his men to teach Li a brutal lesson. Their methods were merciless. They sprayed chili powder into Li's eyes, then dragged him to an abandoned warehouse. There, they beat him to the brink of death. At one point, they pulled out a knife and threatened to kill him. By then, Li was so terrified that he lost control of his bladder, wetting himself as he begged for mercy, promising never to return. Seeing that Li was truly frightened, D's gang decided to release him. However, before letting him go, they issued one final warning. If he dared to go to the police, their death threats would become a reality. Faced with such ruthless criminals, Li ultimately remained silent, choosing to endure his losses rather than risk his life. In just a few short years, these criminal operations had amassed illegal earnings of up to 4.48 billion yuan from gambling alone. However, his ambitions didn't stop there. Beyond his businesses in the food, entertainment, and gambling industries, Di also ventured into real estate. His gang established Supreme Real Estate Development Company, Limited in Hebei, and aggressively expanded their influence in property development. During the construction of the Changchun Tong project in Luanqing County, Shijiazhuang, Di's gang not only forged compensation documents, but also repeatedly used violence to force villagers to relocate. Many villagers, unhappy with a meager compensation of just 350 yuan per square meter, tried to negotiate with him, but their efforts were met with brutal retaliation. Li's family was one of those affected. His family refused to accept the unfair compensation, and in response, these men took revenge in the most terrifying ways. They poured gasoline in front of his house, threw firecrackers into his livestock farm, and continuously harassed his father's tobacco and liquor shop, forcing them out of business. Another victim was an elderly man named Gu, 76 years old. Like Li, Gu also refused to accept the relocation compensation and, as a result, became the target of Di's gang's vicious retaliation. They not only threatened him, but also restricted his movements, forbidding him from leaving his home. At one point, they even threw live snakes into his courtyard to terrorize him and his family, forcing them to live in constant fear. However, Gu refused to back down. As his resistance persisted, Di's gang grew more enraged. One night, they kidnapped Gu and took him to a canal. Using an excavator, they dug a deep hole in the ground, threatening to bury him alive if he didn't sign the relocation agreement. Left with no choice, the elderly man finally surrendered, signing the papers under duress. Beyond using violence to force evictions, Di's gang was also involved in other illegal activities, such as violent debt collection and illegal possession of firearms. For nearly 20 years, the criminal organization led by Di had carried out countless illegal operations in the city of Shijiazhuang and surrounding areas. The gang was responsible for a total of 37 serious crimes, including organized prostitution, illegal gambling, disturbing public order, and unlawful detention. Violent clashes and turf wars between gangs occurred frequently. The downfall of the crime lord. Many people secretly contacted the police and reported these crimes. As law enforcement gradually grasped the severity of his gang's illegal activities, they launched a large-scale crackdown. The local police established a special investigative team to gather evidence against Di's organization. Once enough evidence was collected, on July 11th, 2019, the authorities swiftly took action, conducting a raid on Di's Jinba Fan Hotel in Shijiazhuang. At that time, many of his underground casinos had already been shut down, and all entertainment establishments linked to his gang were ordered to cease operations. Ultimately, a total of 126 gang members were arrested one by one. On September 18, 2021, the Intermediate People's Court of Xingtai City, Hebei Province, delivered the final verdict. All 126 members of Di's gang were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 1 to 18 years, while those who had protected and facilitated the gang's activities were also severely punished. With that, the criminal syndicate that had ruled Shijiazhuang for nearly 20 years was completely dismantled. However, the unfortunate reality remains that the gang's leader, Wu Di, is still on the run. Currently, the police have issued a bounty of 50,000 yuan for information leading to his capture. Di went from a young man who once dreamed of becoming a soldier to a ruthless crime boss. However, his insatiable greed turned an ambitious soul into a reckless man, willing to sacrifice his honor and humanity in pursuit of illicit wealth. As of now, his whereabouts remain unknown. Perhaps he has already perished, or he may still be in hiding somewhere. But one thing is certain: sooner or later, he will face the consequences he deserves. Today, we're digging into the tale of a ruthless crime boss, Yang Shunchong. On the surface, Yang Shunchong was the chairman of the Mianyang Ready Mix Concrete Association, a polished businessman admired by all. But beneath that glossy exterior, he was the kingpin of Mianyang City's largest criminal empire. Starting in the 1990s, Yang Shunchong rounded up a crew of unemployed drifters and ex-cons to build a gang he ruled with an iron fist. They exploited the murky ties between business and the underworld, channeling profits from legit ventures into fueling their criminal exploits. With this, they locked down a monopoly over Mianyang's commercial markets, even calling the shots on industry prices. Through sheer violence, they crushed their rivals, racking up over 40 crimes, organized brawls, coerced deals, illegal mining, and extortion. The most notorious incident erupted at the Shiyuan village construction site. To keep his project on track, Yang Shunchong unleashed over 300 goons to clash with local villagers, leaving hundreds injured. Even the cops sent to intervene didn't escape the bloodshed. After the dust settled, he paid a pack of teenagers 1,000 renminbi a day to take the blame. His cruelty was off the charts. Born in 1962 in Mianyang, Yang Shunchong was the baby of the family, spoiled beyond reason from day one. Anything good or flashy was reserved for him, which turned him lazy, cocky, and insufferably bossy. Yet his parents were just regular workers, barely scraping by, not nearly enough to fund his lavish tastes. Whenever he saw a friend with something new, Yang resorted to brute force to snatch it. The school called his parents in repeatedly, but they brushed it off as childish antics, refusing to care. Eventually, the school lost patience and kicked him out. The start of a criminal streak. Once expelled, Yang started drifting through society, falling in with a rough crowd of slackers. From a young age, he picked up smoking, drinking, and haunting entertainment hotspots like bars and karaoke joints. As his social circle grew, so did his expenses. The pocket money from his family couldn't keep up, so he teamed up with his buddies for petty theft. But after a few jobs, he realized it wouldn't make him rich. Their victims were just average folks with nothing special to steal. To strike it big, he needed to target the well-off, especially businessmen flush with cash. Problem was these guys didn't stroll down the street. They drove cars, their money stashed tight inside. So to get at it, Yang cooked up a vicious plan, faking tire blowouts. He and his crew practiced day and night to perfect the sound. Once they nailed it, they'd lurk by the roadside, waiting for a car to pass, then mimic the noise. Drivers, hearing it, would pull over to check their tires, giving Yang's gang the perfect chance to yank the door open and grab whatever was inside. It wasn't genius, but it was fresh for its time, and their heists almost always paid off. By the 1990s, as entertainment hubs boomed across China, Yang used his stolen cash to open gambling dens. With money and slick scams, he lured Mianyang's big shot bosses into the gambling game. These guys played hard, betting sums that could hit hundreds of millions or even tens of millions of RMB. In the 90s, that was a fortune, enough that a single lucky night could land Yang a plot of land or hundreds of storefronts. But when luck ran dry, the losses piled up too. Still, with his gangster grit, he'd keep the table locked down until he came out on top. No one could leave unless he won. Local merchants seethed at this nonsense, but didn't dare speak up. Beyond gambling, Yang pulled off scams, extorted cash, and illegally detained people for massive profits. Those he blackmailed stayed silent, cowed by his power. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. Once, a guy named Wang won over 100,000 renminbi at Yang's casino. Seeing this, Yang's face darkened. He ordered his thugs to grab Wang and drag him to a hotel. There, Yang cranked the air conditioning to freezing, forced Wang into a cold shower, and terrorized him until he confessed to cheating. Then, Yang didn't just confiscate the winnings. He made Wang sign a 100,000 renminbi IOU. After that ordeal, Wang couldn't take it anymore and reported Yang to the police. As a result, Yang Shunchong landed in jail. Yet even a few months behind bars didn't change him. Fresh out, he jumped right back into his old ways, recruiting more jobless punks and ex-cons as muscle for his crimes. Over time, he built a sprawling criminal syndicate under his command. In 2007, Yang leveraged his clout to start a concrete company in Mianyang. He rolled out a black-to-business, business-to-black model locally, blending commerce with underworld muscle. He didn't just collect protection fees from concrete suppliers. He banned any rival companies from operating on his turf. Entrepreneurs trying to set up concrete firms in Mianyang faced brutal ambushes and beatdowns from his crew. After those incidents, no one dared do business in his domain. Then came 2008, when a massive Wenchuan earthquake hit. Post-disaster rebuilding was a gold mine in Yang's eyes. He pounced on the chance, using companies like Mianyang Chenglong Concrete and Mianyang Building Materials Company, plus threats and his underworld sway, to strong-arm other businesses into submission. He even founded the Mianyang Ready Mix Concrete Association and crowned himself chairman. With that title, Yang brazenly carved up Mianyang's concrete market, pocketing the lion's share of profits and tossing scraps to the rest. He didn't just monopolize sales and set prices in the ready-mix concrete game. He used violence to punish anyone who defied his rules, cementing his ruthless reputation. In July 2015, as construction began on the Mianyang Central Hospital, a developer named Qian refused to use the pricey concrete products dictated by Yang Shanchan. The fallout was swift. Qian started getting threatening calls from Yang's crew. But Qian wouldn't back down. He stood his ground, sparking Yang's fury. Yang warned Qian to show up at the Haiyang Jingti house immediately to apologize or face the consequences. Frightened by Yang's threats, but unwilling to cave, Qian reluctantly told his driver, Lai Mao, to take him there. What awaited them, though, was a savage beating. The moment they pulled into the parking lot, over a dozen thugs armed with steel pipes and knives swarmed them. Without a word, the mob attacked relentlessly. In the chaos, Lai Mao took a brutal stab wound, and Qian, seeing the violence spiral toward a possible murder, dropped to his knees, begging Yang for mercy. Yang called off his men but boasted arrogantly, "If someone dies, I'll just hire a fall guy, so anyone who crosses me ends up regretting it." His brazenness was staggering. Beyond directing his lackeys to do dirty work, Yang repeatedly rallied hundreds of underworld figures for his criminal schemes, paying them to join in. The most infamous clash happened at the Shiyuan village construction site. Using his clout, Yang had snagged a rock and soil construction project at a medical school site in Shiyuan village, on the outskirts of Mianyang. To keep things running smoothly, he rounded up about 300 men armed with clubs and stormed the site, brutally beating the locals. On the day of the incident, Yang sent his crew to form a gang of thugs, dropping them off near Shiyuan village. He handed out hard hats and iron rods, not just for their protection, but to tell his men apart from the villagers and avoid friendly fire. White hard hats went to the ringleaders, red ones to the regular goons. Anyone without a hat? Obviously a villager. Fair game for a thrashing. That day, police got a flood of calls from locals and raced to the scene to take control. But when Yang's gang spotted the cops, instead of backing off, they turned their clubs on them too. Several officers ended up badly injured and hospitalized. Not far from the chaos, Yang lounged in an Audi, gleefully orchestrating the attack. He'd planned the timing, escape routes, and even set aside cash to cover injuries for his crew. The rampage left hundreds of innocent villagers and police officers seriously hurt. To dodge accountability, Yang shelled out 90,000 renminbi to hire 3 teenagers to take the rap. Before they turned themselves in, he funded their partying spree and promised each 1,000 renminbi a day while they played the scapegoats. Yang wielded money and power to break the law with impunity. For over 20 years, he held Mianyang in his grip, his syndicate ballooning into the region's biggest criminal outfit. They pulled off over 40 major crimes, 19 different charges from assault to organized brawls to racketeering. That's just the big ones. Smaller fights were too many to count. Their illegal profits soared past 200 million renminbi, unmasking the dark truth. As the saying goes, walk in the dark long enough and you'll eventually meet a ghost. When a nationwide crackdown on organized crime kicked off, Mianyang police set their sights on dismantling Yang's empire. They deployed elite squads to investigate, but it was a tough slog. Though they knew Yang was the ringleader, details on his crew were scarce, and most leads were vague whispers. Direct evidence was hard to come by. Victims and witnesses, terrified of retaliation, stayed silent, refusing to spill the truth to authorities. This stonewalling made the investigation a nightmare. During the probe, Mianyang police found themselves tailed closely by Yang's men. To keep the team safe, the task force went undercover, moving their base to a discreet spot 20 kilometers from downtown. There they worked in secret, quietly reaching out to victims and insiders. After over a month of relentless effort, the task force struck gold while reviewing a case tied to Lai Mao and the Haiyang Exine incident. After that beating, Lai Mao took hush money from Yang and kept quiet. Yang then tapped a lackey to confess in his place. When investigators tracked down Lai Mao, he clammed up, but they spotted oddities in a blurry, few-second clip from the scene. The guy who surrendered only showed up after Lai Mao was injured, proving he wasn't in on the attack. This thread unraveled the truth. Yang had orchestrated teens to take the fall, covering his tracks. Beyond that, they cracked open other cases where Yang hid evidence, obstructed witnesses, shielded crooks, and dodged justice. At 5 a.m. on May 7, 2018, armed with solid proof, Mianyang police mobilized over 320 officers, 40 squad cars, police dogs, and weapons to nab key syndicate members across Chengdu, Mianyang, Jiangyu, and Santai. The sheer force caught Yang off guard. He had no chance to resist. When nabbed, his hands were tied behind his back, a black hood over his head, flanked by 2 SWAT officers. The once mighty crime lord looked downright pathetic, a far cry from his former swagger. Afterward, Mianyang police urged the public to share tips on Yang Xuanchang's crimes. This time, victims of his gang's terror stepped forward, no longer silenced. Over nearly 2 years of dogged investigation, the task force spanned over 10 provinces and cities, rounding up 29 more members. They froze and seized 26 million renminbi in cash, confiscated 169 antiques, including 2 national treasures and 5 third-grade relics worth about 8 million renminbi, nabbed cars valued over 10 million renminbi, locked down 5 commercial plots in central Mianyang plus over 100 storefronts, and seized over 50 concrete mixers and 200,000 cubic meters of sand and gravel. The total haul tied to the case topped 200 million renminbi. On December 31st, 2019, the Mianyang Intermediate People's Court opened Yang Xuanchang's trial. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with all assets confiscated. The other 37 defendants got 6 to 19 years each. After ruling Mianyang for over 20 years, Yang's syndicate was finally uprooted. His 2-decade reign of intimidation and violence crumbled thanks to the courage of those who spoke out and the relentless resolve of law enforcement.